Here we're
Hello?
talking. We are
What?
talking pickleball. Seriously, are you
Today?
there?
All
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
today,
sure. All
Tuesday,
right.
Tuesday,
All right.
Tuesday, Tuesday at
Okay.
Tuesday at noon. At
All
least
right.
noon here. It's later
3
where
o'clock.
it's later where you live. Hey everybody, we're talking pickleball. I am CJ Johnson from the Better Pickleball channel, and
Oh, you can introduce me. You can introduce me, CJ. Do
go
your thing.
ahead. Oh my goodness. And then it's the wonderful Tony Roy from Into Pickle, and combined, we are VI Pickleball. So today, I don't know what we're talking about, but it is going to have to do with pickleball, right? I mean,
100%.
you've been thinking pickleball. I've been thinking pickleball. We're going to check our tech. How's everybody doing out there? Give us let us know where you are watching from. Put your city in the comments below. Let us know if you played pickleball today. I didn't. Did you play pickleball today, Tony? Yes, no. Are you thinking about playing pickleball? Oh, Tony, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so did you play pickleball today?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking everybody else. I was
Well,
opening up the
I was
Facebook thing
asking
here.
I was asking them, but I'm also asking
Oh,
you.
I got you.
Did
All
you
right.
play pickleball today?
I did not. Today is swimming day. Today was get down and swim, do a little stretching. I'm going to tell you the best thing I've been doing for myself these days, and I think it's really helping my pickleball, believe it or not, it's just a simple thing, is I am hanging. So I go downstairs. We have a gym, and basically, we have a pull-up bar, and all I do is I grab onto the pull-up bar and I hang for about 30 to 45 seconds. Amazing. Everything gets nice, and I know I could do longer and more reps, but just that one time works for me, and it gets me doing it. So that's what I did today. And then I swam.
I love it. I have, as Tony knows, I've been having some issues with my back. I have 3 bulging discs, and one of the things I do, I have an inversion table, so I hang upside down. It's easier on the shoulders. It takes up more space. The inversion table is kind of big, but I definitely get some relief from it. So I see Chuck and Dixie and Helene over on Facebook. Hi, welcome to all of you. Tell us where you are um, watching from. But I took a ride with Cody Rigsby today. There's nothing like that to fire you up. So if you know who Cody Rigsby is, put your leaderboard name in the chat and I will follow you, because that means they're a fellow biker and not like the motorcycle kind. Ooh,
I just got a
Laura.
compliment on my haircut, CJ. I got a compliment on this beautiful haircut. So thank you, Laura.
Does that mean you are on? You, it looks like you're on Facebook. You're supposed to be over on
I'm
YouTube.
everywhere, CJ.
You're supposed to be
If it
on.
exists,
You are on.
I
You're
am.
supposed to be over on YouTube. Okay.
I'm on everything right now.
We are
I
going to
got
talk.
Barry, Carol, Dennis, Stan, and Joan. What's happening, party people? Hello.
We're going to take your questions today too. So if you have some questions, go ahead and put them into the chat on either side, because we'll be taking your questions. But here's what I was thinking about. Did you happen to see any of the PPA this weekend? From they were in St. George, Utah. Did you see it, Tony?
I followed it some. I followed the results more than I watched some of the matches. But it was interesting results. But I understand there was an issue out there, wasn't there? Or not an
Well,
issue, but you know.
there was. So I follow Dane Gingrich, and if you don't, Dane has a pretty amusing Instagram feed. I know he's over here on
Yeah.
Facebook, but I really like his Instagram feed, and he's a mental performance coach. He actually, I know he won with Weinbach, and I think he might have won the mixed doubles with Jen Dawson. But in any event, he posted the snow that was happening before the event. And it got me to thinking, because there's people that are still playing in cold weather. And making sure that when you are playing in cold weather, what are you doing in between games? What are you doing for your body? It got me to think about that. So, Tony, when you're playing, and you know, when you're playing, and you're typically playing in some pretty warm weather, what do you do in between games to take care of your body?
Usually I'm playing, like you said, I'm usually playing in overheating conditions. So even when I've been up north, because when Jill and I played, like when we played Michigan, for instance, where I played with my friend Mike Nelson up in Kalamazoo, it was so hot inside that arena. It was one of those hockey arenas, and there's no AC in the summertime, and it was hotter in there than it was in Florida, I think. But so I'm usually dealing with the opposite end of the spectrum. So I usually have to be careful with hydration, right? Number one, electrolytes. So not just hydration, because and you can correct me if I'm wrong, CJ, because you're more of an expert on this. But my understanding is if I lower my, too much water, right? If I'm losing salt, can cause loss of electrolytes, right? So you got to kind of balance that out, but not go crazy also with the energy drink. So I'm trying to balance that. And then sunscreen for me, right? Being outdoors, and I do have a problem with overheating. If I get warm or hot in my body, I'll be hot for hours afterwards. So it's a silly little trick, but one thing I do is I wear a baseball cap when I play, or a pickleball cap, you know, even a cap. So
Hmm.
I take it off, and the steam just comes off the head, you know. So just little things like that. I also change my shirts a lot. I like to wear these kind of tri blends. I don't like that poly stuff, and so I try and change my shirts frequently to kind of allow my body to cool off. So I'm usually dealing with the hot side, not the
The
cold side.
the opposite, because do you realize that we lose around 6% of our heat out of our head?
Don't surprise me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's a good tip for
I've actually
cooling off.
seen steam come off my head, like literally, like, and it's crazy. It's nuts. So
And I'm just the opposite because I'm in the mountains and I'm in the cold weather. And so one of the things that I don't do is I don't cut my hair in the wintertime, right? Keeps my head just a little bit warmer
mhm.
and losing the heat. But so Tony gave you some great suggestions if you happen to be in warm weather. But if you happen to be in cool weather, some suggestions for you would be to make sure that you keep moving between games, especially if you're playing rec play. Sometimes, right, in rec play, you can sit down and you may be sitting down for 5 to 10 minutes. You jump back up, you go out on the courts, and you haven't stretched. You're going to be a little bit tight. So try to keep yourself moving between games. And then the other thing, Tony, you touched on this. It is hydration. It's easier, at least I think it's easier to drink more when it's warm out. When it's cold, it's harder for
Yeah.
me to drink more water, but it's not any less needed by my body. My body, well, maybe a little less needed because you're probably not perspiring as much when it's cold, but your body still needs water and your muscles need that to perform. So it got me thinking about that, and just make sure a lot of people playing in the chilly weather, take care of yourself. Ask yourself, what are you doing between games? Would be great. Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. A couple.
That's what I
A
was
couple.
thinking about.
I like it. I like it. So I'm gonna ask a question, and I'll go back to YouTube and Facebook and see what the general answer is, because there's a couple different areas that I made notes, that the things that CJ and I have been talking about, we've been working on and stuff like that, and we only have so much time, right? So what I'd like to do is figure out whether y'all would prefer us to speak on the concept of ratings. And by ratings, I'm not talking about like the rating system. Put the UTPR aside, please. I'm talking about like whether knowing your rating is important. Would you like us to talk about, or would you like to talk more about like paddles, or concepts on paddles, or are you more interested in like, as you know, CJ and I have been working on Project 4.0. Is that something that's more of interest to you? So we're going to talk about. We have some other stuff to talk about, but we probably can't cover all three things during today. So what's one most interest to you, and we're going to deal with it. I got a couple questions, CJ, I'd like to address real quick from John Davison from down here in Florida, up in Jacksonville area, as I recall. John asked one question facetiously. He asked me, who has the best mustache in pickleball? Because I saw John recently and he was sporting off this awesome mustache, so obviously it's John. But his more serious question was about kind of breakout stars. He was talking about Zane Navratil, becoming quite a star on the tour. So he asked who else will be a breakout star of 2021. I'm going to throw out a name that I don't know that he's a surprise, but in my tour, right? So in the senior tour, I think Mersal from South Florida is going to be, he's already a force to be reckoned with, but he's one of these players that he's really dedicated to improving. He's playing at the highest levels, and I think you're going to see him, make some further strides, I think, and assert some dominance perhaps in the senior pro tour. So. And it may not be exactly what you're asking, John, but that's where I'm going with that. So, what do you think, CJ?
You know, I will tell you, it was interesting. I'm not as connected to maybe some of the breakout stars. You've got a little bit more of a pickleball mecca for people who are up and coming and who are really focused on that down there. So I'm not in. Just have to give a shout out because she's like trying to say hello. Shirley is here today. Normally she's sleeping. She's just decided she's gonna photobomb our pickleball today.
Oh, what's
And
happening, Shirley? How you doing?
and it's not Shirley K, although she might be over on YouTube. But yeah, you know what's interesting. Tony and I were talking about this weekend when we were watching the PPA. I pulled up pickleballtournaments.com, just kind of saw who was winning, and happened to notice some of the different teams that were in the mix this weekend. And one of Tony's friends, he's been over in VI Pickleball, John Sperling, lost in the first round. Kind of a shocker. But man, they regrouped. They came back, charging back hard. So there's so many names though that when I got in there, you just didn't recognize them, right? And all great players. You know, lots of great players.
There's definitely a lot of movement right now. You know, I mean, I think everybody, if you're listening to this, pickleball is growing, right? So it's attracting more and more athletes from different backgrounds, right? But obviously, one of those backgrounds includes tennis, and so what you're going to see is a lot more young and over 50 former tennis players gravitate towards pickleball for a variety of reasons, and it's going to be fascinating to see them bring different skill sets, not just different ideas, different concepts, different ways to address the game. And so I think it's going to be fascinating. Laurel asked a kind of a follow-up, which is, why do you suppose most of the pros changed partners this past weekend? That's always an interesting question, Laurel. The most interesting one to me, obviously, was Ben and Colin not playing together. I know them I know Colin better than Ben. I say hi to them, I chat with them, but I don't know them well enough to know why that happened. But they both did well. They both made it to the finals. I think Colin was playing with Stone, and Ben was playing with. It wasn't Wright, was it? I can't remember who Ben was playing with, but obviously
Matt,
a very good player.
I think wasn't it Wright and Warnick?
Oh, Callan Dawson.
Together?
Wasn't it Callan Dawson?
He was playing with Callan Dawson. Yeah, I think it was Wright and Warnick. Wright and Warnick were playing together.
Okay, right. So no, so Callan Dawson actually was playing with Tyson McGuffin.
Tyson.
So, anyway, I can't remember who Ben played with, but Deckel. Thank you, Lori. So he played with Deckel Barr, who's obviously a very good player. But so you have these changing pros. Kathy asked a question. Let me address that real quick. Kathy, is this for beginners? Absolutely. We touch on different subjects here, but we're talking a little bit about pros. We're talking about other things. We're going to talk about ratings, paddles, or one of them. We'll see which one you like. Kathy, let us know. Would you rather us talk about paddles or the importance of ratings in terms of players' development? So we'll get to that. So, but anyway, in terms of changing partners, I think it's really interesting to see that happen. But I don't really have an answer as to why it's happening. So.
I think a lot of it, this was Weinbach, at least from his perspective. Dave Weinbach addressed this when he was on the live a little earlier in the year, and one of the things that he shared was just scheduling. And I think with this tournament being in the West, that you didn't see a few of the East Coast players that you may typically see traveling to this particular tournament. So sometimes it's just a scheduling thing. Like as an example, I think in the last PPA, Dane didn't play. He's a West Coaster. He didn't play in one of the East Coast events, and then you see him here a little closer to home in St. George. So according to Dave, I think scheduling has a bit to do with who they're playing with at different events. But it is pretty interesting to see some of the different partnerships and what happens inside of those partnerships. I thought the Johns and Deckel Bar partnership was kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, all right. So, CJ, the word I'm getting on the responses here looks like mostly ratings, which is fine. Happy to talk about it. If you want to hear about paddles, feel free to check out last week and this week's Pickleball Therapy podcast that we put out. You can find it on any podcast platform. Just to put in the words pickleball and therapy together, and you'll see a picture of Jill and I playing in a tournament. It's kind of a cool picture, so it has a nice background and everything. So we have that one on there. But check that out. We talk about those things. So CJ, let's talk a little about ratings. How do you feel about that?
Let's talk about ratings if that's what you guys want to talk about. What are the questions?
Well, they're not really questions. I think people it's curiosity, I think, right? So people are asking, some questions are about ratings for local tournaments and things like that. But, I think I'm going to give you my quick spiel or relatively quick spiel on ratings. ratings are necessary evil, if you will. Why do we need ratings? We need ratings specifically. If the only reason you really need ratings is if you're going to play in a tournament, right? Whether I'm a 4.5, a 5.0, a 4.0, whatever. What matters is when I get on the court, can I play with the players that I'm playing with, right, or trying to play with? And so a lot of that is, I think, some self-awareness is good here. Not saying that you shouldn't play with players that aren't as good as you, or you shouldn't try to play with players who are better than you, but having an understanding of kind of where you're at in your own path, right along. CJ and I talk about your path, right? So where you are on your path will help you define or help you bracket, right? Kind of the kind of games that you're going to play in, and so you want to kind of challenge yourself, but you also want to help those those that aren't quite at your level, and also play at your level, right? Whatever level that is, that's what's important. So the only time you really need a rating is if you're going to sign up for a tournament. And what I recommend there is if you're going to sign up for a tournament, right? What I suggest in your first tournament, you only really need to know one time, right? Because you go to a tournament, you sign up, you'll know either you're in the right bracket or not the right bracket. I would suggest to you, particularly for your first tournament, to shoot high. Now, I'm not telling you to sign up for 5.0 if you're not ready for 5.0, right? But I am suggesting that, say that you came from tennis and you've played 30 years of tennis and you got into the game and you're competitive out there when you play rec, then sign up for 4.0 and just see what happens. You know what I mean? If you get clobbered, then okay, next time I'll sign up for 3.5. If you go 2-2, let's say, or roughly even, you're probably in the right division, right? If you sweep everybody and you get gold, then the next time 4.5. So you really only need to do it one time. What I wanted to address. Well, CJ, let's stop there. What do you think of that, CJ? And then I want to talk a little bit more about kind of how ratings, I think, can derail sometimes our thought processes. But why don't you go, CJ? Let us know what your thoughts are, and then if you guys have any questions about what I just said, put it in there, and we'll try and close this loop.
Interesting. I didn't expect you to say go higher. I thought you might say go a little bit lower. And only because of what we're going to talk about next, or what you said we want to talk about, is kind of how it can derail you mentally. Um, so took a partner to a tournament. This is a couple years ago, and she had to play at my rating. This was her first tournament. She had to play at my rating, and it really derailed her mentally because she felt very, she felt, how can I say, she felt a little beat up after that tournament. She got picked on. She got picked on, and she's a good player. She came from tennis. She was a D1 player. She came from tennis, and she got a little picked on, and actually we were 2-out in that particular tournament. So her mental side didn't take that very well. I understand what you're saying from the find out where you are and find out where you're at. I think that was a learning experience from her as well, but mentally it wasn't probably the best experience. So I think that can
Well,
work both ways.
what I would
Depends on the
suggest,
person.
CJ, right, that's true, and it does tie into kind of what I wanted to say was basically about ratings. Is I find that players sometimes spend a lot of time or a lot of mental energy thinking about, okay, am I this or am I that?
Yeah.
Am I that or am I this? What I would suggest is the rating. To me, the rating should be a byproduct, right? Your goal, even though yes, okay, I want to play 4.0, but we don't just tell you, hey, get to be 4.0, right? We actually define it for you. We say that's what Project 4.0 is about. We say, what a 4.0 player does is they know these things. It's not so much the number, right? Because we can make the number anything. But the way we define a benchmark 4.0 player is a player who totally understands the game. The difference between a benchmark 4.0 player and a 4.5 player, for instance, is not that the 4.5 player knows how to hit a third shot and the 4.0 player doesn't, because the benchmark 4.0 player does know how to hit a third shot, does know the importance of getting to the MVZ after he turns a serve, does understand the strategy when you're playing the serve side of the game. So all those things are known to the 4.0 player. The difference usually between a 4.0 and a 4.5 is percentage of execution, right? So the 4.5 usually will have a little more execution, but really the biggest difference is going to be pace. So 4.5s usually hit the ball a little bit harder or a little more aggressively than the 4.0s. Like their putaways are a little crisper, a little harder. So that's what. And then when you go 4.5 to 5.0, similar. Though it's a jump where there's a little bit more better execution, but from 4.0 to 5.0, the difference in play really, like if you watch a 4.0 on a court with a 5.0, the 4.0 can play, right? The 4-0 may not win, but the 4-0 can play there. When you look at the difference between like a 3-0 and a 4-0, that's a much bigger gap, right? You see a 3-0 on a court with a 4-0, it looks like a whole like a different world of play. So I guess what I was trying to say in general about ratings is don't worry whether you're a 3-0 or 3-5 or 4-0. Worry about learning the game, right? Worry about learning the importance of the different sides of the game, the things that you need to be able to do to accomplish the objectives that make sense in pickleball. The rating will follow, right? So, boy, CJ, what do you think about that? And then I want to tell you a quick war story.
Well, because so here's one of the things that we talk a lot about, and Tony really built this on his channel with the first four shots of the game. And when you watch a lot of tournament video, there are 4 or 5 players who are not locking down the non-volley zone and making use of the first 4 shots of the game the way that they could be. Certainly, you see that error a little bit more in less rated players in tournament play, but it's still happening to some players in a 4-5 level. So understanding the game, and let me finish that thought though. If they got more proficient at that, they probably would jump to the next level, right? So it is so much about the understanding and being able to do it consistently. So I completely agree with you. But and I think, Tony, that's what you see when you see some of these really great players come from tennis. They come from tennis and they don't necessarily dominate right away, or they changed their game, like the Waters, right? I mean, yes, they came out and they were certainly a dominant team. They had a lot of weapons, but they weren't totally infallible. They went back and they have spent time changing their games to add things into pickleball because they now understand pickleball in a way that's different than they did when they were first exposed to the game with, certainly all the talent that those 2 ladies bring to the game. So I agree with that one.
Right. And the other thing, CJ, there is like you look at styles of play, right? What you just alluded to or mentioned is, like if you look at a Cammie McGregor, right? Cammie McGregor played tennis at a very high level, right? So she plays pickleball a certain way. But then you look at Lisa Naumu. I don't know what Lisa Naumu's background is, athletically. I think she's done something athletically before, but she is not a tennis player. She does not hit the ball like a tennis player. Her strokes are totally, totally different than any of the other ladies she's normally on the court with, whether it's Jennifer Dawson, Cam McGregor, any of those players, right? But she's very effective. Why? Because she understands pickleball, right? And she understands, okay, this is, and the other thing is, and this is what CJ and I, again, try to work on is, so you understand the game, which Lisa Naumu does. She also understands what Lisa Naumu can do. Lisa Naumu does not try to play Jennifer Dawson style pickleball. She doesn't try to play Cammie McGregor style pickleball. She plays Lisa Naumu style pickleball. And she mates it with what she needs to do and puts those 2 together, and it's very, very effective. But you need to have both. So you need to have an understanding and you need to know yourself, and then you work on the skills that you have. You can add skills. Nobody's saying you can't grow, but you know kind of what you bring to the table. You know what you're trying to do. You put those together, and that's how you become the best version of yourself as a pickleball player.
Well, and I'm going to jump in here because I don't remember her name, but one of our gals, somebody on Facebook, I think, asked, is this for beginners? This is the exact concept for beginners. What skills do you bring to the table? What do you bring to pickleball? And as Tony said, if you were a high-level tennis player, that's a different set of skills than even if you were a racquetball player, right? If racquetball was your sport, or perhaps you had no racket sports whatsoever. Understanding what you have and understanding what you need to do to play pickleball and make those styles match, that's where the magic happens. Because if you don't come to pickleball, let's just say you weren't a tennis player, so you don't come with a hard driving style, it's not our suggestion that that's what you work on first. There are plenty of other areas that you can work on to become a really good pickleball player that you don't need to add a drive until way later in your pickleball development.
Agreed. And CJ, let me clarify something because there's some not confusion, but there's some questions that are comments that I'm seeing in Facebook and YouTube about the ratings issue. I am not suggesting that if you're a 3.0 player that you just sign up for 4.0 tournament play. That's not productive. What I'm suggesting is that if let's say you just started playing, you've never played a sport before, you just started playing pickleball, play 2-5, play 3-0. That's fine. Play whatever the lowest division is in the tournament, and do the best you can. If, however, you let's say you're at your rec center and you are the dominant player at your rec center after 8 months of playing. Again, you have a background in some racket sport, racquetball, tennis, ping pong. You feel comfortable on the court and you understand the game. Then yeah, then go 3-5 or 4-0 even. I mean, don't what I'm trying to say is don't necessarily go underneath your level. But I'm also not saying you started playing yesterday, sign up for a 4-0 tournament, see what happens. It's not quite that loose. But I am saying if you're not sure, say you're between 3-5 and 4-0, but you're not really sure, sign up for 4-0. I don't see any harm in that. If you're between 3-0 and 3-5, don't sign up for 4-0. And if you think you're closer to 3-0, sign up for 3-0. That's what I'm saying. The other question down here is from Dale on a couple of questions from Dale on Hello Dale on YouTube. One is if the top 6.0 player is better than the ones in the past, what is the trickle down effect to the ratings? That's actually been very interesting. I play senior pro, but I'm a 5.0 rated player. The 6.0 would be like Ben John, so that would be the Simone and people like that, right? That's the highest. So what's happened is now that they have pro divisions, which they didn't originally have except in very few tournaments back in the day. So now they have pro divisions. That's actually kind of created a vacuum at the 5.0. So what's happened is players are playing either pro or 4-5, leaving the 5.0 area pretty empty right now. So that's definitely had an impact. And the other question Dale asked, which is related, I guess, was do certain regions have ratings that are higher maybe due to tournament players sandbagging? Dale, I mean, ratings are always going to be, and Johnny has the same question over on Facebook. The rating stuff is always going to be kind of an issue, and that's just something that they're going to have to sort out over time. And I don't think it's ever going to be finalized. I mean, there's always going to be an issue with tournament ratings. So.
Tony, I want to jump around and I want to jump over to a thing that we sometimes see, and we actually did talk about this in a conversation this morning. Uh, there's a certain set of players who are probably playing above where they think they are, and how that mental gap between their skill set and their confidence causes them problems out on the court. So let's talk a little bit about that. I think you had a story.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is you have what you find right. So we were talking about that this morning. We were talking about almost like there's players who are 3-5 on the court and 4-0 in their mind. And I'm only using ratings here to explain rather than having to explain the whole type of player, right? I'm just using it to shortcut the conversation. So you have people who are 4-0s in their mind who play like 3-5s, and people who are play like 4-0s but are 3-5 in their mind. So there's sometimes a disparity between our perception of ourselves and our actual play. And what happens is you see when we travel around the country, we go to certain courts that have like quote advanced, quote beginner courts, and I'll play on both courts, right? So I'll go to both different courts just to mingle and help and play right with different folks. And so what I find a lot of times is there's players on the beginner court that are way better than the average players on the advanced courts, and likewise there's players on the advanced courts that should probably be over here if they're really going to do that. But the reason they're here and here is because of their perception. And so to me, I think the 4-0 in the mind, but actual 3-5, that's fine. I mean, that's just life. The person that I want to try and reach, right, with this conversation is the 4-0 player who's a 3-5 in their mind, right? Or worse, 3-0 in their mind, right? If they're actually a better player than they think they are. That player, I think, will limit themselves, right, in terms of their challenging themselves. So I would suggest that you be objective when you're looking around and you're seeing how other players are playing and how you play. Be objective, not in terms of that you win or lose, but in terms of the skill set that you have and your understanding of the game. And try and play on courts that are going to be challenging to you. And definitely use judgment here, but definitely if you can play on that court, don't let that court tell you that you can't play on that court. You go on that court and you play on that court and you get the reps that you need in order to continue your development as a pickleball player. Don't not move up because you have maybe a missed self-perception of your game.
And so my suggestion that follows on top of that, and it was actually tonight in VI Pickleball, we've got our founding members book club, and the book we're studying is the mental and emotional training for tennis. We always say, don't let the name fool you. Coach Pete wrote a great book. Tony's got some podcasts on it. But one of the chapters that we're looking at tonight talks about a couple of things that feed into that: wins, losses, and allowing yourself to make mistakes. So when you're out there, if you are only judging your ability on your wins and your losses, you're missing the big picture.
You'll hate the game.
You'll hate it. And pickleball is a two-person sport. Right, there are two people, or most of the time pickleball is a two-person sport. There are two people on that court, so it's not all about the win and losses. The second part is, I think that a lot of times when players have that lack of confidence, I think it's about feeling like they shouldn't be making those types of mistakes, right? They chastise themselves very critically for what they see to be as simple mistakes, and they miss the picture that even the 6-0 players hit a return into the net, hit a serve into the net. It may not seem like it, they do it less often, but everybody makes mistakes. So
Right.
be kind to yourself.
And the other thing, CJ, is, and you and I talked about this earlier. Our podcast this week is going to have a segment called basically "You're Supposed to Lose," which is not what people want to hear. But when you are on the serve side, when you're serving, if you're playing an equal opponent, and think of it, the easiest way to think about it is your mirror image. So you're playing a clone of yourself and your partner on the other side. You are statistically, probabilities are you are supposed to lose that exchange, because then the only reason is it's not that you're a bad player or a bad person or whatever. It's that the other team, your opponents, are up at the non-volley zone line because they're the returner, and you're at the baseline. So if you're at the baseline and they're up there and you're equally matched, you're supposed to lose. So if your metric, like you mentioned, CJ, if your metric is I won the rally or I lost the rally, that's going to be just very disappointing for you, because you're going to lose 70% of those. And so, you're going to be upset 70% of the time, when instead think about it and say, not did I win or lose the rally, did I work? Was I productive? Did I do the best that I could to try and succeed in that rally? So,
Because I thought it was interesting. So one of the analogies that Coach Pete uses in his book, he's talking about the best tennis players in the world, the Serenas, the Rogers, and that 50% of their rallies end in, I think it was 55% of their rallies end not because of a winner, but because of an error. Okay. And when I started to think about it, when you think about pickleball, and like I said, I was briefly watching a little bit of the PPA. I would bet in pickleball it's higher. I would bet that it's probably somewhere around that 70 or 75% of rallies end because of an error, not because of just a sheer outright winner. You even at the top levels, you don't see once in a while somebody gets too close to the middle and somebody sneaks one down the line, right? Or hits an around the post when the ball went out wide. So sometimes you see the clear winners, but usually it's a mistake that leads to the winner.
yeah, clean winners are very rare. I mean, if you think about it, yeah, clean winners are a ball, basically getting past players with no contact in doubles is, in pros, almost non-existent, I would say. So yeah.
Well, and I would say that the amount certainly it's greater in lesser levels than the pros, but I think the mentality is I see a lot of people always trying to hit clean winners instead of trying to force the error and take advantage of the error. I guess that's
Right.
what. All right, have we
CJ,
got some?
Dale brought up something on YouTube. Yeah, he brought up something on YouTube that I think merits conversation, which is,
Cool.
and it is an interesting issue. So Dale says, I have played on some courts like that. I assume he's talking about the courts I was talking about with advanced and beginner. And some players move up way too soon and drag the play level down. So can players, sort of move up too soon, I guess? Or, first of all, I'd ask the question of who's making that determination, right? Who's determining that player moved up too soon? there's always going to be, you know, in open play situations, there's always going to be some amount of disparity between the players on the you know, in the groupings, right? Um, but what I would suggest, Dale, is that, and everybody, there's a flip side to it, right? Which is how many players are on the other courts that should be on these courts. In other words, how many players, and that's what I'm talking about. The player who believes that they're better than they are, you know, that's just a thing, right? I don't really have any advice for that player. You know, self-awareness, I don't have a way to impart self-awareness. But what I'm trying to suggest is there are players who are putting themselves on the lower courts or the beginner courts, who probably could play on the higher courts. And so the question is, should that player stay on the lower courts because in their mind they've made themselves a 3.0 player, right? When they may actually be a 3.5 player or a 4.0 player. And I know players like this who don't understand that they have all the skills necessary to play 4.0. They just need reps at the 4.0 level. Are they going to be great their first couple of weeks on the 4.0 courts? Probably not, because they haven't been on those courts. Now, the other players have had the advantage of playing on those courts for a year, 2 years, however long. Give this player a couple of weeks chance, this player may not only belong on that court, may dominate those courts. So that's what we're talking about.
Cool. All right. So, if you've got any questions, was there something else that you seem to be like all over Facebook and
I'm
YouTube
everywhere. I don't
today?
see anything else. I think that's it on the questions. Yeah, looks like everybody's, CJ, we always cover everything. People never have questions because we cover it all.
We do cover
See,
it all.
that's an example of where, in my mind, I'm a 6.0, we're 6.0 YouTubers.
Yeah, and then when the minute we get off of this, then we
Yeah.
say, "Oh man, I wanted to talk about this and I forgot about
Why did
it."
I
So,
pop that up? I popped that ball up. Exactly.
exactly. Exactly. You got anything else for us, Tony?
I mean, we can talk for a second about Project 4.0. You know, the premise. Let me just explain the premise. So the premise of Project 4.0 is a lot of folks that watch our videos, and just a lot of players. If you look numerically, most players are 4.0 and, you know, under in terms of number, right? So, you know, what a 4.0 player means, as I mentioned earlier, is at least the way we define a 4.0 player. That's a player who understands all facets of the game. That's a player who understands strategically what they're trying to accomplish, has some level of skill in hitting the shots that are necessary, right? Doesn't mean you have to hit 100% of your third shots. Doesn't mean you never miss a volley or a put away or anything like that. But it means that you understand the game, you understand how the game is constructed, and you're trying to play. I don't like saying play proper pickleball, right? Because there's different ways to play productive or good pickleball, right? You know, some players, and you know, nobody can tell the Sobiks, for instance, that they don't know how to play just because they drive the ball more than the average bear. Same thing with the Waters. No one can tell the Waters they know how to play. No one can tell, you know, Jeff Warnick that he doesn't know how to play because he holds the paddle and hits it with only one side, right? So there's different strokes for different folks, if you will. But what all of those players have in common is they understand what they're trying to do. They understand what when they're on the serve, when they're on the return, what the differences are, those types of things. And they have sufficient proficiency. Well, they have better than sufficient because they're pros, but they're proficient enough at the shots that they need in order to play the game successfully. So that's what a benchmark 4.0 player is. And if you need a more objective metric, we define a benchmark 4.0 player as a player who competes at the 4.0 level. If you play tournaments, competes at the 4.0 level, and may not medal all the time. We suggest that the player will be medaled 25% of the time or more as a 4.0 player, and is what we consider a tough out, meaning you might beat them, but it's not going to be easy to beat them. You're gonna be in for a battle with these folks. So that's what Project 4.0 is about. It's basically about focusing on the things. Going back to what I said earlier, so it's having the understanding, right, and then analyzing yourself objectively, and then mating those two, not going off into like some la la land of, you know, I'm going to learn a Ben Johns roll shot because that's the next thing on my list, when maybe that's not what you need to get you to where you want to get as a player. So that's really the focus of Project 4.0, and that's what we've been working on. We'll continue to work on. So.
And I just want to throw in there because Tony did a blog last weekend. I've got one coming out this weekend. That is one of the things we're talking about is understanding where you are, right? Understanding this marriage. Um, Too many people, in our opinion, get shiny penny. Or if anyone remembers the movie Up, right? Do you remember Up? Did you
Yep.
see Up?
Squirrel.
Squirrel. Ooh, that's like a jinx. That was almost like it was playing. Um, but too many people get sidetracked. They start down the line. They're focused on things that will help them to improve, and then they see the latest video or somebody at their court tells them this or whatever the case may be, and now all of a sudden they're ping-ponging from one skill to the next. Okay, now I have to hit a backhand roll. Um, you can check out the blogs. And by the way, if you're not on our email list, that's probably the best way to understand when we're going live, what we got coming your way, our YouTube videos, that whole bit. Go to wearepickleball.com/7, the number 7 tips, TIPS. We've got a nice giveaway there for you, and you'll get all this information. So you don't have to go around looking for it. But one of the things that we're talking about is just making sure that you're staying focused on the things that can help you the most instead of chasing around, because there's not one shot. I can guarantee you, you can learn if you learn the backhand roll, will it improve your pickleball? Possibly. Is it going to take you from a 3-5 to a 4-0 player that Tony was just describing who's consistent there? Yeah, probably not. There's not one magic shiny penny. It's doing a lot of little things the best way that you can do them, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the tools that you're bringing to the game. So that's kind of like, if there's one thing
Definitely got to
that
marry the two.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If there's one thing that we can tell you that'll help you on your pickleball journey, that's it. Stop chasing the shiny object. Stop it.
Yep.
Be done.
A couple questions on YouTube. CJ, one is Michael says, "What about playing with friends at a lower level in tournaments that bring your tournament rating down?" Michael, I don't recommend playing down. If you want to play with a friend of yours, that's fine, but make your friend would play up with you. That's your call. That situation obviously may not be as much fun. It may not be as competitive, but it's going to be the same thing if a player plays down, right? Then you have a player on the court that is just too dominating of a character. So that'd be my suggestion. Dennis says, "I watch pro tournaments on YouTube, and almost every time after returning a serve, that person rushes to the NBZ line." Absolutely correct, Dennis. That's a fundamental basic thing that you got to do. If you're not at the NBZ line as a returner, no bueno. Lose many games that way.
Lock it down. You have to. That's one of the things, Dennis. That's one of the things that we really, I would say, harp on almost in VI pickleball is making sure that you're locking down the NVZ, and that goes for the fact that if you're the serve team, that you got to get to the NVZ, and once you're there, you got to stay there. It's amazing how many people get there and then give it away without a good reason. Without a good reason.
Nice.
Let me preface that. Cool. All right.
CJ, Stan said he used the technique of the going up and one up, one back, going in before the serve gets hit. And he said on match point, the returner hit the ball hard at Stan trying to hit him with it. He dodged it, watched it sail out, match point, won. Good job, Stan. Yeah, he called it the Tony technique, which I like. The Tony technique. We're gonna trademark that.
If you didn't see it, we talked about the Tony technique last week. So make sure you go back and look at that video.
It's an actual thing. It's not just nonsense. It's an actual thing. So
exactly.
Anyway.
All right. Okay. Well, it's been fun, as usual.
Yeah,
as usual. We'll be live again next week. I don't know when. Might be this time. Might be a later time. Like I said, if you're interested in knowing more about what we're doing, and what we have coming your way to help you play better pickleball, make sure that you go to wearepickleball.com/7 tips. The number 7 TIPS tips. And that's the best way to stay in touch with us. All right. Thanks for being here, everybody. Have an awesome
guys
day.
and gals.
Yep. All right. Bye.